Hello and welcome to the show, Ivy Nation Sports Talk, up and rolling, along with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers, and Jesse, you found it right away. D. Trollheader, like he was in there hammering already on what time we were going to start. I mean, it's like I'm looking at the clock. It's 5:01 right now. I'm feeling pretty good about this.
On time is when we're starting.
Yeah, that's right.
DT
Nailed
Troll
it.
Hunter. Roll Hunter.
He's trolling you, is what he's doing. Well, we've got a lot to get to because it is We In, We Out Day on Ivy Nation Sports Talk, and the place to submit the questions for We In, We Out is the Champions Lounge. So that's the place to do it. It is obviously a premium subscribers site, and submitting questions for this show and for Brian's Buy, Sell, Hold aren't the only things that you'll find there. There's a ton of great content. I saw Ryan just posted something up there recruiting wise. So tons of stuff there. Great time to be a subscriber as we get ready for the season. And the season officially starts July 31st when training camp opens. But of course, it is always Notre Dame football season here at Irish Breakdown. So there really is no off season, which is why we're here. So let's just get right to it. Right off the bat, the leader in each tackles, sacks, and interceptions will be by a first-year starter at Notre Dame. Doesn't have to be the same person, but transfers do count for this. So will a first-year starter lead the Irish in sacks, tackles, and interceptions this season? We in or we out on that?
I'm going to say we out on that one. I'll go with Drake Bowen for tackles. Sacks, I'll go Howard Cross.
Interesting.
And
right
interceptions, I'll go Benjamin Morrison.
I'm out on it as well, but I've got R.J. Oben leading in sacks, so there's a first-year starter at Notre Dame. Tackles, I am going Drake Bowen, so there's a first-year starter at Notre Dame. I've got two so far. Interceptions, I'm going with Xavier Watts again. I'm not going to go with a corner. I don't think Watts is going to have 7 like he had last year, but I think 4 or 5 will probably end up being the team leader this year. So I think Watts for a second straight year will have a nice interception number, but I think it'll be the safety again and not one of the corners. Good question to start us off, though. I like that. Now, I don't know, D. Troll Hunter put this one in. Transfer portal settlement, the NCAA agreed to with the states who are suing them. We in, we out on that.
I'm going to have to say defer because I don't know anything about that.
I mean, I'm guessing this is you don't have to, they're like blanket transfers, basically. I mean, I'm at least partially in, just because with all the restraint of trade type stuff that has gone along, with all this different stuff that's been in and out of the courts. I mean, it's why it's led us to where we are right now. Yeah, blanket transfers is what D. Troll Hunter is saying. I mean, I think that that's what everything was leading to. I just don't think that there was a way around being able to do that in college athletics. So I'm hesitantly, I still prefer it to the old system where coaches could decide, they could block transfers from going to different, and that was only 6 or 7 years ago, maybe, where coaches were still able to do that kind of stuff, block transfers to different places and stuff like that. So the system is not great overall, but I just don't think there was any way around being able to do it. From God Country Notre Dame Barbecue. Ohio State's defensive line and front seven presented a greater challenge to Notre Dame in 2023 than the Texas A&M D-line and front seven will give Notre Dame in 2024. We in, we out on that.
I'm going to say we are in on that. And I don't know specifically the ranks of the Texas A&M defense. But that was a really good unit last year. And I'm talking for Ohio State, actually,
Right.
is what I'm talking about. They had a really good year. And I think that was a combination of, the new defensive coordinator finally settling in, some older players settling in. They have really good linebackers. So I'm just going to say preliminarily, I'm just going to say out.
Yeah, no. Okay, so you're saying you're out. So are you saying Texas A&M's defensive line will or won't give Notre Dame more trouble?
Won't.
Okay. That's the way I'm going as well, because I think that there was legit talent up front at Ohio State. There's legit talent at Texas A&M, but it is largely unproven. Like Nick Scourton coming in from Purdue, that's a nice transfer that they got. He had 10 sacks last year at Purdue. Outside linebacker guy, kind of curious to see exactly how they play him. He's got some pretty good size, though, at 6'4", 280, so I imagine he's going to be a defensive end. But you look at some of the other guys like Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, DJ Hicks. I mean, they're all below 300 pounds. Now they're in the 285 to 290 range and that kind of thing. But I don't think that they're going to present. They're largely unproven, I guess is what I'm saying. So I don't think they're going to present near the challenge that Ohio State did last year. Now, the one caveat is obviously you had 2 NFL tackles last year. You don't have them this year. So what kind of impact does that make? Like when you look at Scourton, that's a potential matchup. Like whether it's against Charles Jagasaw or whoever ends up being at right tackle, depending on where he lines up. That'll be, I think, one of the biggest matchups of the night, how Notre Dame deals with him. But you also do have a much more mobile quarterback. So I don't think that that A&M's defensive line will present the kind of challenge that Ohio State's did last year.
I just think they're a unit stronger. I think maybe there's potential of, like you were saying, high-end players that might be better. But as a unit, I would take Ohio State's.
Right. And it will be game 1. And, as USMA 87 says, they'll be good. First game will be hit and miss. And that's what I've kind of said all along. I still think it's an advantage for Notre Dame going on the road to Texas A&M that it is a game 1 and not even like game 6 or 7 or year 2 for Mike Elko and just everything else. I think that's an advantage for Notre Dame. Tommy Guns. Now I can bring this up with Vince obviously tomorrow, but he says Dylan D'Addario will kick 1 year for Michigan, and his highlight kick that season will be to beat Ohio State. We in or we out on that?
I'm going to say we out simply because I don't think Vince would ever allow his son to go to Michigan.
Now, Vince addressed this yesterday during the mailbag. He actually said he would live with it if that was, the best opportunity that Dylan had to kick in college. He would have to find a way to live with that. He could deal with it. Do you realize, because I was thinking about the math on this, Dylan going into his junior season in a high school, so he's a 2025 kid. This could happen in 2030. That's when this potentially, an extra year of eligibility and all that stuff. 2030 could potentially be when Dylan D'Addario is kicking for Michigan in the game-winning field goal against Ohio State. Think about that for a second.
Already making me feel old.
Tommy, the Indians will win the AL Central. In or out?
So I would have said at the beginning of the season out, but
there they are.
That Jose Ramirez just had. The man is leading the league in RBIs. In May, he had 33 RBIs. He's like 6th in home runs, 15th in on-base percentage plus slug. They're really good defensively. I'm going to say we in, but I would have felt really good about this had – I can't think of the guy's name right now, but their ace got hurt the second game of the season. So it's thinking about what they potentially could have, like they could have been even better at this point.
Yeah.
If you would have told me at the beginning of the season it would have came down to the Guardians and Royals, I would have called you crazy, but that's likely what it's going to come down to.
It's what it's looking like right now. And the Royals just won today to salvage a split in the series. Here we go. Nipping on their tail.
Bobby Witt Jr. had 2 home runs against them the other day in a game. I love watching him play.
Yep.
I thought it was going to be the Twins here.
Yeah, it's good young team the Royals have. It's not like that 2014 team that lost in Game 7 of the World Series to the Giants, but it's like they've got some wheels out there, some good athletes, put the ball in play. Like you said, Bobby Witt Jr. is one of the best players in all the game right now, but nobody's going to know it, until about 4 years or so from now when he signs a big free agent contract with the Yankees or whoever it happens to be. But I think it's going to come down to Cleveland and Kansas City this year. I'll give Cleveland slight edge, I guess, begrudgingly, but they definitely have a little bit more experience, a little bit higher caliber player.
I will say the thing that's the most commendable about them is they have not very small, but they don't have a high payroll. And their farm development is incredible. Like the amount of guys, the amount of pitching that they develop is really good. And it just seems like they always can plug and play with a minor leaguer. And this year it's David Fry. Like you didn't know who David Fry was last year. And so I'm really impressed by, as an organization, what they're able to do. Like they really stretch their money, essentially.
Right. Good with the payroll. Exactly. So, in or out on Notre Dame making the college football playoff this year? He says, this is 5 Burkhart boys, is his handle. He says, seems like a trick question, but it's not. So, does it trick you?
I'm going to say we in. At 11-1.
I'm in too. Yeah. And I don't think it's inconceivable, but that they end up running the table. But I think 11-1, 12-0 gets them in, as long as that one maybe L isn't a bad L. That's still kind of in the back of my mind. Going back to that consistency. In or out, the Cowgirls will finish below 500 this season. Bringing heat, Glee 93-40.
This is a non-biased answer as well. This isn't just. I'm going to say we out. There's still a lot of talent on this team. And I'm excited to see what an experienced defensive coordinator like Mike Zimmer can do. And this is a contract year for Dak, and he just had a baby. I think he's going to be playing at his highest level. I just think he's got a lot of motivation right now. We talked about earlier in the week, they're going to have a tough offseason with CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons. And, Dak's contract being up, that's a lot of money, but I think this is kind of the last hurrah for this core group of players in Dallas.
Yeah, I'm definitely out on this. They're a 10-win team at worst, and I think I told you I've got them 11-12 wins is what I'm thinking. So even kind of allowing for some margin of error. And I saw some stuff the other day about they didn't play well against teams with winning records, and they've got all these teams with winning records. Well, okay, winning record versus how good was that team actually. I mean, that's what happens when you play a first place schedule. It's going to get a little bit tougher the next year, but I don't think that they're going to finish below 500. Anthony calling you out. Dan Quinn wasn't experienced, Jesse?
No, Dan Quinn was a good coordinator. It's just he wore thin at the end, and they knew they had linebacker run game issues, and it got exposed against the Packers. And so I just don't think that same thing would happen to Mike Zimmer. I think they're two different styles of defense. I think you're going to see more, legit linebackers, run stopping linebackers in the middle under a Mike Zimmer defense. Dan Quinn likes to get a lot of pressures and a lot of hurries. And I think that, he loves corners that are more, risky, guys who can jump routes. That's why there's a lot of risk reward on this, on Dan Quinn's defense, I think. But I think Mike Zimmer is more kind of bland, more traditional. And I'm just kind of excited to see what that difference looks like. And if like Ryan Roberts said, like I hope Mozzie Smith has a great season because they need him to. That's a high-end draft pick, and they were incredibly weak up the middle on the defensive line.
I mean, I won't get hung up on it, but the stuff that you talked about with what Dan Quinn had to play, I mean, it was due to injuries, and you can point to how the roster was built as opposed to the defensive coordinator, I think, in that situation. But at the same time, I mean, that's a yearly issue, right? That's never going away. I think that there is enough there based on the division. You know, like I saw, the Giants and Commanders, they should both be better this year, and all this stuff.
Get out of here. What do you think about this?
I mean, the Giants were a playoff team 2 years ago, and the Cowboys still swept them in both games. So, what were you saying?
I said, how do you feel about this, the contract year statement?
Yeah, Salty says he hates the whole contract year thing. Players will do their best in a contract year, like it's fine to do less than your best in other years. I mean,
all I
don't completely disagree, but it's professional sports, and guys get motivated by the opportunity to make that big money. And like the Cowboys, in part, are where they are right now because of the fact. Again, it's a broken record with Jerry Jones. If he had gone out and figured something out, restructured Dak's contract, done a new contract, this wouldn't be a thing right now. But instead, they've left him dangling going into a contract year. And so, like, as a player, I think I'd be very motivated as well, with all those things. And, Jerry thinks that the market is just going to magically reset itself, but he's going to end up paying more than he wanted to begin with by letting it go this long.
All I got to say to this, and this is any aspect, not just contract years of football. This is applicable anywhere else. Just it's a hungrier dog hunts harder. You know what I mean? Like when a dog doesn't know when its next food or when its next paycheck is coming, it's going to hunt a little bit harder, right? You get into that fight or flight type mode. So I just think naturally, subconsciously, whether you want to accept it or not, when you're put in tense situations, you're going to perform at a higher level.
Another one from Tommy. College game day will make an appearance at less than 1.5 Big Ten games this season. So essentially over under 1.5 Big Ten games that game day finds itself at.
We out. There's, especially with the expansion and the acquisition of Oregon and
I mean, Ohio State, Oregon, everyone's licking their chops over that one already.
Michigan, Texas,
Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan, USC, like too many games. They're going to be at least 2, if not double that many. I wouldn't be surprised. So we definitely out on that. Another one, though, College game day will cover more than 1.5 Notre Dame games, home or away.
I'm going to have to say, are they doing, I think they're doing Notre Dame.
They are at A&M. They're at A&M.
So this automatically becomes, do we think one more game is coming between, Florida State, USC, potentially Louisville? I'm just going to say we in, because I think like if you did a rolling average, Notre Dame gets about 2 per season, it feels like.
Yeah, I just, again, because of the complexion of the schedule, I've got to be out on this. I don't think that there are enough others that are going to.
I think it's dependent on what Florida State is like in that when it comes to that game.
Right, and when you look at the fact that, like, if Notre Dame and Florida State go into that game undefeated, okay, maybe there's a pretty good opportunity, and I'm not sure that there are a lot of other big games that weekend off the top of my head, but I think that they're both going to have to be undefeated for that to happen. I'm just going to go under. I think that because of what we just talked about with the expansion of the other 2 big conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC, I think that they're going to gobble up just a ton of real estate. And then you're also going to probably have Colorado, Nebraska play early in the season. I mean, there's still going to be some interest in Colorado nationally. So I'm going to go out. I think that Notre Dame's opener at A&M is going to end up being their only game day game this season. In or out on Sean Stifler as the future of Notre Dame baseball?
Can I hold? I mean, this is we talked about
You're
year
either
three.
in or you're out on this show, Jesse. There is no in between.
We talked about, what year 3 means and the importance to Marcus Freeman. I think the same holds true to Stifler. The letdown from the program getting up to, an apex back to the College World Series, the program being handed off, and then to immediately not make, not even at least make the tournament 2 years in a row. It's not a great look. And I don't know what he's going to do pitching wise to change that around, because they were atrocious at pitching. So I'm just going to have to say we out.
Yeah.
If I'm playing the odds, I just have to say, I don't want to say we out, but if I'm playing the odds, that's what I got to do.
And I can take your hold. If you want to say hold, I'll accept your hold, because I was kidding about you've either got to be, but the bottom line is, look, this to me is a very make or break season for Sean Stifler. What happened, not, this year, next season, obviously, year 3, because you expected there to, after going to the College World Series under Link Jarrett, completely expected that when you change head coaches, there's going to be some drop off. And they dropped off a little bit. They still made the ACC tournament. They were just outside the NCAA bubble last year, but they felt you would hope that as things sort of reset, that they would have at least been the same, if not taken, at least a little nudge forward. But they took 3 steps back, man. Like 9 wins in the ACC and tying the worst record that Notre Dame has ever had in ACC play. That is not good in year 2. And at the same time, Link Jarrett is down there at Florida State after he missed the tournament in his first season at Florida State last year. He's 2 wins away from going back to the College World Series now. And the odds are in his favor that he's going to end up going to the College World Series, because they're hosting UConn this weekend. Now, that doesn't mean UConn's going to be a walk. I
didn't even realize that they're already into regionals.
Super regionals are this weekend.
I mean, they're in super regionals, and they get UConn.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a really good chance Link Jarrett's going back to Omaha after
2 programs
this
in
weekend.
3 years.
Right. And
it makes me sad.
I said it before, like at a very minimum, Notre Dame in year 3 under Sean Stifler has to be back in the ACC tournament next year, and they at least have to be a bubble NCAA tournament team to consider next season a success. They need to be in the hunt for a tournament bid going into Memorial Day weekend, which is when the conference tournaments, championships take place. So that's to me what they've got to be.
I was just reading an article. Florida State suffered their worst season in program history last season. And then this season, they had the nation's best turnaround in total wins in one season.
Got one of the best pitchers in the country. And, that's something that was always lacking. Not always, but even under Mike Martin, Link Jarrett's coach, the Hall of Fame coach that took Florida State to the World Series all the time, is like they typically had pretty good hitting teams, but it was their pitching that was always – they didn't quite have the elite pitchers to win a national championship. And Link's got at least one elite guy this year. So I'm not going to be surprised to see them competing for a national championship here in a couple of weeks. I guess it'll be a week away. Father's Day weekend is when the World Series starts. Okay, 13 reasons why Audric Estime will become the starter for the Denver Broncos this season. We in or we out on that?
So right now you have Javonte Williams and I believe Samaje Perine in front of him. I definitely think he's going to pass up Perine. I don't know about Williams, because Williams is still considered a young, good running back. I'm just going to have to say we out for now. But I don't like – I still think he's going to get a fair share of carries. I just don't think he's going to be the lead back.
No, I agree. I think the only way he becomes a starter this season is if those guys get injured, basically, especially Williams. He's obviously the lead dog. If it ends up being, Estime and P. Ryan, and Williams is injured, I think that there's a very good chance that Estime could start, but I'm not going to bank on an injury happen. So I don't think that he's going to overtake anybody this year. But as you said, I think he's going to get his share of carries and still have a fairly productive rookie season. Joe Allen 72. We in or we out on Manti Te'o getting elected into the College Football Hall of Fame on his first ballot. I don't know if you've done any research on this. Oh, you're in. You're not even going to waste any time. You're just in.
Yeah, I think if his first 3 seasons were already super impressive, and then you add his senior season, and I believe he has the best finish ever by a linebacker in terms of Heisman. I think that goes a long way to be literally a finalist as a linebacker for the award. I think that's ultimately going to be the kind of deciding factor, if we're being honest, and to have something that no one else can say, on your resume. I think that's enough for me to push him in.
I think he's very deserving, but here's the problem. There are 77 guys on the ballot for the College Football Hall of Fame. There's so many. Now, there are a lot of times where you get 20 to 30 guys who get elected as well. The classes have been smaller over the last several years since they've moved down to Atlanta. Remember when it was here in South Bend, I kind of did more around enshrinement weekend and all that different kind of stuff, and just kind of looking at different, there never seemed to be a rhyme or reason why it took, one guy literally 30 years to get in, and then another guy might get in on his first or second ballot. But there are so many guys on the ballot, and that's what here's some names on the ballot along with Manti Te'o. Flozell Adams, Kajana Carter, Dallas Clark, Aaron Donald is on the ballot this year. Graham Harrell, Marvin Harrison, Craig Ironhead Haywood, Deshaun Jackson, Mark Ingram, the former Alabama running back, Michael Vick, Takeo Spikes, Simeon Rice, Antoine Randall L., Ken Norton Jr., who won Super Bowls. Of course, now that doesn't count toward his College Football Hall of Fame. He played for UCLA, but Super Bowls with both the 49ers and the Cowboys. Michael Orr, Mr. Blindside himself. Haloti Ngata, Kellen Moore, Herman Moore, Marshawn Lynch, Olin Kreutz, Sebastian Janikowski, and Terrence Newman, who not only is from my hometown of Salina, Kansas, but went to my high school several years afterwards. But he went to Kansas State, another Dallas Cowboy. But I mean, that is a load of talent right there. And trying to figure out who's getting in and who isn't, and trying to put a first ballot guy in when he's up against some of those guys. I think I've got to be out on this. That doesn't mean he's not deserving, but I've got to be out just because there's so much sheer talent that's on the ballot for this thing. And Todd Light, I forgot to mention Todd Light. He's on the ballot as well. Another Notre Dame guy. And then Nick Saban and Urban Meyer, a couple coaches are all on the ballot as well. We in or we out on Jaden Greathouse leading the team in both receptions and receiving yards this year?
Receptions and receiving yards, you say?
Yes, I did.
I can say we out. I think you can make a case for receptions, but I don't see the receiving yards.
I think I'm in that boat as well. I've got to be out on the double. I think that, like Chris Mitchell or Bo Collins end up being the yardage leader. But I completely agree with what you're saying. Like receptions I could see, I just don't see Greathouse beating out those other guys for the yardage when it's all said and done. Salty, of course, was completely in on that one. And then he asked his own question. Notre Dame will finish the regular season with a better record and higher ranking than one of the conference champions that receives a 1-4 seed and first round bye in the playoffs.
I think what that would entail is going undefeated. It's hard to be perfect. I'm just going to say we out. I think that there is going to be an undefeated or one-loss Big Ten team. And
really? Okay.
And I think that Notre Dame is also a one-loss team. So I'm just going to have to say we out.
And it is going to be interesting, like, because you're saying conference champion, which means they win the conference championship.
Sorry, I read this wrong. I was just thinking about the Big Ten, but there's more than it. There's 1 through 4 seeds and
Any of the
Yeah.
So Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12.
You know, I'm gonna revise. I'm gonna say we in on that one.
Yeah, I'm in on it too.
I think there will be a conference champ with 2 losses in there.
Exactly.
And I think very well Notre Dame could be at 1 loss.
That's what I was about to work my way through. I do think that there will be at least 1 2-loss champion because of the fact that you're going to have so many good teams playing. Like SEC, the odds are very high that you could have a 2-loss team end up winning the whole thing.
It's so cute how much DK and Salty support each other in the show chat, on the message boards. Ooh, thank you for your post.
I love you. No, I love you, man. The hottest seat in Power 4 is Sam Pittman of Arkansas. He says honorable mentions to Dave Aranda and Clark Lee. We in or we out on that?
Man, let me just go through my Rolodex of every coach in a Power 5 conference right now, or I guess Power 4 conference. I just need to bring up conferences real quick.
I'll give you my rationale if you want to listen here for a second. And I think that these are all very good candidates. Like you look at Pittman, he's going into year 5. They were 4-8 overall.
No, I really agree about Pittman because they were on. I thought they were going to kind of be, flip the script like 2 years ago, and it just didn't happen. I think they beat Alabama.
Yeah, Dave Aranda, Clark Lee. They've also unfortunately taken steps back. Clark Lee went from 2 wins to 5 wins in year 2, but he went right back to 2 and couldn't win an SEC game last year. The question is how understanding is the administration? They're obviously going to want to see some improvement here. So I'm completely in on Pittman, but here's my dark horse. Okay. Between Billy Napier at Florida and Mario Cristobal at Miami, those are kind of, and somebody, Buffo, the motivational business, said Billy Napier, and that's 6-7, 5-7 in his first 2 years, 3 SEC wins in each season. He's obviously got to improve. Mario Cristobal, I don't know that it's a hot seat for Cristobal, and I wouldn't even say hot seat, but 5-7 and 7-6 in his first 2 years, going 3-5 both years in the ACC, and with all this, noise and everything else kind of around them. Here's what's really interesting, especially like these 2 teams, Miami and Florida, Napier and Cristobal, open the season against each other. And so then for Cristobal, if he loses to Florida and, you've got potentially a loss to Florida State coming as well, and he's hovering around 500, I could easily see Miami making a move. So I don't see him on the hot seat going into the season. I see Napier on more of a hot seat. He's definitely got to finish, I think, above 500 this year. But Cristobal is kind of my dark horse to end up on the hot seat if he loses to both of those in-state teams and they don't make some pretty noticeable improvement otherwise. And they've got to play Louisville as well.
I'm going to have a little bit of fun here.
Okay.
I'm going to throw the name out Dabo Swinney because
I thought about him.
Because the thing is, when you set a precedent like he did, and then you show signs of regression, and just I'm purely just speaking on, look at the backlash he received last year for not even having a down year, just really having, you know what I mean, just kind of like an above average, but not really below average season.
Sure.
And the amount, and so I think if he does that again, or if he's even potentially one loss worse, like as much as it's not really warranted, I still think you could put his name on the list. For me, personally, and this one I don't think is anywhere near true because of, I don't know why, but James Franklin would be on the hot seat for me, especially with expansion and if he loses again to Michigan, Ohio State, And then I haven't looked at their schedule yet this season, but I'm assuming they got to play at least one of Texas, or not Texas, Oregon, USC, Washington. If he loses one of those, you know what I mean? He's got to at some point show that he can win these big games and run out a quarterback that can actually do something. So, right. I mean, I would personally say James Franklin, but for some reason, I don't know if Penn State would ever actually put him on the hot seat. And then the last one I have, and I don't know who the coach is, but who's Tennessee's head coach?
Heupel?
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. Now, why Heupel? Let me ask you first. Somebody said Ryan Day. I mean, the guy's 56-8, 39-3 in the Big Ten. The losses are to Michigan, and Jim Harbaugh is gone now. I mean, do you think if Ryan Day goes 11-1 and one loss to Michigan, but they're in the playoff, that they're going to fire Ryan Day? Because I think that's a very reasonable scenario to expect that's going to happen.
So when Heupel got there, they were 7-6. The year before they were 3-7. His first year they were 7-6, and then they were really good his second year. Got that Orange Bowl victory, and they were 11-2. And then this past season they struggled more and went 9-4. I'm just saying if he goes back down to 7-6 or potentially a below 500 record, I could see him being one of those guys on the hot seat. So I was just trying to think a little bit outside of the box and give some names that were, maybe a little bit more risky, but more fun to kind of talk about.
Sure. A little more outside the box than the ones off the top of the list. Irish fans are excited with Love's big play ability. However, Jadarian Price will have more carries and rushing yards this season. This one is from DJ. We in or we out on that?
I would say we out. I think there's a potential he might have more carries because Love is splitting time out at slot receiver. So again, it's for Love, it's almost like a pitch count. How many snaps do they want him to get per game, right? Like whatever that number is, and then what that ratio looks like between running back and slot wide receiver. I still think that Love will end up being the leading rusher on this team, though. Even though Price might have more carries, I just think Love is more of a home run hitter as a runner. I think he's going to get you more of those 10-plus type runs compared to Jadarian Price. But that's just me.
See, I'm in on this. You're out on this. I'm in on this. I think Price does end up being the leading rusher. I think that total yards, Jeremiah Love is going to have more between rushing and receiving, but I do think that the receiving stuff is going to keep him from being the leading rusher. I think that ends up being Price this season, especially now that he is basically 2 years removed from his injury. They kind of nursed him back in a little bit last year. And yeah, that's like USMA and I are on the same page with this. I think Price ends up being the leading rusher, but Love is the total yardage guy.
Side note, Penn State does not have to play Michigan this season.
Yeah. I mean, that's
USC, Penn State, and Washington are their big three.
Now, yeah, and I mean, I think from Penn State's perspective, obviously they have to like that because they've had to, in the old Big Ten, they had to play Michigan and Ohio State every year. So I don't think it would have been fair to Penn State, quite frankly, to keep both of them on the schedule when they're getting rid of the divisions this year. I think it probably ends up being like in a 4-year cycle or whatever. Like you get maybe a home and home with one of them, and then then you get the other one or something like that. I'll be curious to I know they've got the future Big Ten schedules put together, but obviously I haven't looked at it closely enough to know exactly when Penn State gets who. So Josh Miller, if the starting offensive line was Alt Jagasaw, Ashton Craig, Schrouth, and Fisher this coming season. I was looking that he had a typo, which is fine, but I was trying to make sure in my mind I was saying the right name. And Fisher this upcoming season, Notre Dame would win the whole dang thing. We in or we out on that?
I'm going to say we out. I just, to me, it all comes down to one position, and that's the quarterback. Yes. And so if you could say, I'll give you Brady Quinn in this offense, I would say we in. You know what I mean? Like that's the type of what I would have to do to say we in on this. But I mean, ultimately Notre Dame will be fine at offensive line. Even if they struggle a little bit, I think they'll figure it out. They have tons of talent at running back and wide receiver. Their defense is going to be legit. They're getting a lot of young studs into the rotation. So to me, it comes down, as it has been really the last decade, 2 decades, is what is the quarterback position going to do to be a game changer, to win the big games. So I'm going to say out.
I'm out as well. I don't think the success or failure of this team is riding, solely on the offensive line. I'm completely in on what you're saying. I think it is much more about the play they get at quarterback than what they get from the offensive line. Now, if what Josh is outlining there happened, I think that they would probably win the Joe Moore Award. They'd be the best offensive line in the nation, but they've won that before, and that hasn't given them a national championship. So I think it's much more about what they get at quarterback, and specifically, can the quarterback make decisive game-winning decisions and plays specifically against the top competition that they're going to play this season. I think it's more about that. I think that their offensive line is still going to be good enough. It's much more about the quarterback to me. Another quarterback question. The offensive line that starts against A&M is not the same most of us are thinking right now. We in or out on that?
I'm going to say we out. I think I have a pretty good idea of what the starting offensive line is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I can't read your mind, DJ, so I don't know exactly what your offensive line would be, or, sort of what most are thinking. I think we're all pretty much questioning, or not questioning, but we're looking at what's going to happen at right guard. Is it going to be Baker? Is it going to be Wagner? Does Sullivan Absher even find his way kind of into that mix come training camp? I don't think it's going to be too much different than that, though. I don't think we're going to see any big surprises like we got last year when Coogan ended up being the starter.
I think Spindler is going to replace Coogan.
Yeah, I'm leaning that direction as well.
My offensive line would be Jagasaw, Spindler, Craig, Shrouth, Tosh Baker.
We've got time here for a few more because you're on a little bit of a time crunch here tonight. So I want to make sure and leave us plenty of time for rapid fire because we've got a lot there as well. So what I'm going to do is, if I don't get to the questions tonight, Vince and I will use them on tomorrow's show. And I think we're actually going to go with, this is interesting. Irish Hawk 31. 2 top high school recruits in Ohio signed huge NIL deals backed by a giant Ohio State booster. We in or out, this is fair game now. And then someone else responded, I think that the recruits, I believe the recruits are out of Florida. So either way, in or out, he's talking more about the philosophy, less than where they're from. Are you in or out on that? Getting the big NIL deals backed by a giant booster.
I'm out on that. I still think if you want to call it NIL, or if you're going to call it NIL, you have to do something to basically market yourself to get that money. I just don't think that a booster should be writing blank checks. I know that's going to happen at some of these schools, but me personally, morally, I would say that, if I'm going to write a college student a hefty check, I think that they have to, just go show up on a commercial somewhere. Go,
right.
Like those boosters got to be making their money somehow. So just have whoever come and do a little ad spot for you and call it a day, right? Like that's all I'm looking for.
Yeah. And at the very least, funnel it through. I don't even know. Are these collectives even going to be still open for business? Now that we do have the revenue sharing that's going to go through and all that kind of stuff. But I agree. Like, it is name, image, and likeness. You should still have to do something with your name, image, and likeness, like you're talking about. Do a TV commercial or whatever it happens to be in order to get that. I don't like the idea of the blank checks, but I mean, it's just harder and harder to regulate now with so much that is up for grabs. With that, Jess, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it.
All right. Dane Brugler from The Athletic revisited his first-round NFL draft projections from a year ago recently. He rated Riley Leonard last year as his number 28 player for this past year's draft. That, of course, was prior to Riley Leonard's injury at Duke. So does that change the way you think or feel about either Leonard or Notre Dame going into this season?
No, I don't think it changes anything. I think that Riley Leonard is graded out as a first round guy as long as he's healthy. And I think that, in terms of how I feel about Notre Dame going into this season, I think that it makes me feel better about Notre Dame because I would say that Riley Leonard is further along in his development as a professional quarterback than what Sam Hartman was a year ago at this time. And so, again, as long as he can stay healthy, that's really the only concern because I think he's going to play better football than what Sam Hartman did. And I think that brings more potential to Notre Dame. So that makes me feel better about Notre Dame.
Yeah, it does not change the way I feel. Really, it only reinforces the way I feel because I've been pretty consistent with the fact that I'm pretty high on Riley Leonard and his potential for this season. But, in terms of, I think there is, a chance of at least being a Heisman finalist. And I do think that there's a really good chance that he ends up being the missing piece with the kind of play that he can give Notre Dame that can be the kind of playmaker, to score some points against Ohio State, score some points against Clemson and Louisville and whoever it happens to be. Florida State, obviously, this year. Clemson, my reference was to last year that they didn't score enough points. But I think that he can be much more consistent with what he brings them. So, again, it doesn't change it. I think that Notre Dame is going to be competing for a college football playoff spot, and I think that he is going to be the catalyst of that and really seeing this, that Brugler did have him projected as a first-round talent a year ago. Again, it only reinforces that for me, that Riley Leonard can be that guy, assuming he's fully healthy. With 86 days to go until the start of Notre Dame's season, what is the one thing you're willing to guarantee about the Irish this fall?
86 days away, and the one thing that I'm willing to guarantee about Notre Dame this season is that they're going to have a more explosive, more talented, and playoff contending offense this season. An offense that is actually going to be a difference maker and not something that's kind of chasing behind, trying to make up and catch up with the talent on the defense. I believe that with 86 days left until the season, this is one of the most balanced Notre Dame teams that we have seen in a while in terms of the defense and offense both being really, really elite and both being almost, the defense is definitely national championship level to me, and I think the offense is going to get to that level as well.
I'm glad that you made your guarantee about the offense because I'm willing to guarantee that Notre Dame is going to have a stingy, nasty defense that takes the field this season. And we've had a lot of questions come in about, are they going to hold them to this many points and all this different stuff. I do think you brought up a good point. Like there were times last year where Notre Dame ended up being maybe turnover dependent sometimes, and that is hard to replicate sometimes because turnovers can be so random. But you look at the schedule that they're going to play, where they play the games, all that stuff. I'm very confident that this is going to be maybe the best defense that we've seen in the last 30 years at Notre Dame. It's going to be very good. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame great Zach Martin says his 11th season in the NFL, this upcoming season with the Dallas Cowboys, could be his last.
Is bittersweet. Watching Zach Martin at Notre Dame, and then obviously watching him being drafted by the Cowboys over Johnny Manziel and that whole saga that came to be, him spending his entire career as a Dallas Cowboy. It's bittersweet. We're talking about one of the best offensive linemen in the entire game, a guy who is for sure going to be in the Hall of Fame. The guy has like more pancakes than penalties, right? Like he's phenomenal. And anytime there's a big run on the edge, it's probably because Zach Martin is pulling around the corner and obliterating, some sort of linebacker, safety, or corner. So, it's bittersweet on both ends. It's a great Notre Dame legend, and he's going to go down as a Cowboy legend as well.
Well, you're right. He's going to go down as one of the best in the game. And like we were talking about, the unfortunate passing of Larry Allen earlier this week, I think that there's a case for Zach Martin as probably one of the three, maybe even two best guards in franchise history for the Cowboys. Allen would be number one. Nate Newton is up there. Zach Martin is right there as well. What's crazy is Zach Martin has been in the league for 10 years now. He's been first team All Pro 7 times. He's been second team All Pro twice. The only time that he didn't make either first or second team All Pro was when he was injured. He had an injury season, so he didn't make it that year. Otherwise, he's been either first team or second team All Pro every year. He's a lock for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and he's going to go down as one of the greats. And it's just unfortunate because, in all likelihood, Jesse, he's also going to end his career without ever winning a championship if he does decide to ultimately hang it up after this upcoming season. Are you still there?
I'm back.
Okay. I was just saying the unfortunate thing is if he does hang it up after this season, he's probably going to go down, as one of the best Cowboys to ever play without winning a championship.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I just had to literally sprint all the way up and down the stairs real quick. So I forgot that someone was coming by, and I didn't leave the door unlocked. So
oh boy,
had to get a quick sprint in. But I think the thing that would be the most disappointing is the wasted talent between Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, and Travis Frederick when he was still healthy, because it was one of the best offensive lines in the entire football, right? And so I think the sad side of this is you waste 11 years of one of the best offensive linemen to do it.
Yeah. But, I mean, Zach Martin has been the best guard in the game in the 10 years that he has been in the NFL. And, I realize, again, that, people still want to talk about Quentin Nelson. And Quentin Nelson is great, but he doesn't have the longevity of Zach Martin. And two, his play has dropped off a little bit the last couple of years. Zach Martin has been the epitome of consistency over the decade he's been in the NFL, decade of greatness. And,
I need everyone to leave me alone. I literally sprinted. You know how steep and high my stairs are. Like
yes, I do.
I mean, I was quick,
You're
right?
Glistening. You're glistening though right now.
I sprinted. I don't have AC in this house.
All right, Jess, we got the release of the college football playoff games, the locations, TV assignments. The first 4 games are going to be on campus home sites, of course. December 20th, that's a Friday, will be the first game at 8 o'clock that night. The 21st, a Saturday, games at noon, 4 and 8 o'clock Eastern time. 2 of the games will be on ESPN/ABC, 2 of them on TNT. Then they'll go to neutral sites for the quarterfinals. The Fiesta Bowl, Tuesday, December 31st, the Peach Bowl, the Rose Bowl, and the Sugar Bowl on New Year's Day will all be quarterfinal sites. The semifinals, January 9th and 10th at the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, and then the national championship game, January 20th in Atlanta. So I guess, we pretty much knew the dates before, but at least now I guess we sort of, like where the games are going to be played and all that stuff, so people can kind of, start looking at potential destinations and all those kind of things. So NBC and Notre Dame released kickoff times and TV assignments last week for Notre Dame's home games in the Shamrock Series game against Army. 6 of those 7 games are going to be broadcast on NBC and simulcast on the Peacock streaming service. To me, Jesse, this is a huge opportunity that's being missed by not just simulcasting the exact same broadcast on both NBC and Peacock, but instead doing an alternate broadcast, a la, like a Manning cast kind of thing. So, first question, do you buy or sell Notre Dame doing an alternate broadcast on Peacock rather than just a straight up simulcast?
Yeah, I would be if we were in and out on this, I would have to say that we would be in on an alternate broadcast, and I think it's a huge blown opportunity because I think you could easily bring Brady Quinn in, and you could pair him with not yet. And Brady Quinn's just the first example, but you could pick any sort of great Notre Dame player of the past who still has enthusiasm about the game, who's still plugged in about the game, and allow them to just kind of nerd out, right? Like give you some of that deeper X and O stuff that you would miss, on your general regular NBC broadcasts.
Yeah, it's, of course you go straight to Brady Quinn because everybody goes straight to Brady Quinn right away.
I know he's got the deal with Fox, so like it wouldn't happen, right? But like that's just again, that's my okay, maybe Rocket Ismail could come on and do something with someone, right? Like someone of nostalgic past that still again has the knowledge to talk about the game at a deeper level.
Right. I mean, look, the majority of the audience for a Notre Dame home football game is what? Notre Dame football fans, right? But NBC has continued to neglect that fan base because they've never put anyone who's Notre Dame, a former Notre Dame player, in that booth. And that's what people want. And to an extent, I understand what NBC is doing. That they don't want any hints of favoritism or bias and that kind of stuff. But again, if the majority of your viewing audience is Notre Dame, they're automatically going to assume bias from a lot of the other peoples who have ended up in the booth, whether it's Doug Flutie or Pat Hayden. I had a hard time for a second remember his name. It's been a few years, from Notre Dame rivals who have been in there. And I just think that an alternate broadcast would solve this problem. Would there be a little extra expense involved? Well, sure, there'd be a little extra expense. But if you're willing to spend $50 million a year, for Notre Dame to have the rights to carry the game, what's an extra million or two to go out and put a different set of people and cater to your Notre Dame fan base, the biggest part of your viewing audience on the Peacock, on the streamer? That I think would actually give people a reason to go over there and find that streamer. You might actually get a lot more people going to Peacock if you actually catered to the fan base who most watches your games on a week in, week out basis.
Yeah, you have to, because at that point, you want to feel like as a consumer, okay, if I have to go out and get this additional service, what additional service am I getting, right? Like what is the difference between this and what could have just been done on NBC? So I feel like as hardcore fans, we want something, basically added or a bonus for having to go out, sign up for Peacock, literally just for one or two games throughout the duration of the season, right? Yeah. So there's got to be some sort of added bonus to make you feel good about the situation rather than making it feel like it's just a hassle for everyone.
Stymie says Montana drinking Guinness and calling the game. Now that would actually be like Notre Dame fans would eat that up, right? You'd love it. And then Josh Boffo, this is exactly what I'm talking about. NBC actually puts people in the booth who hate Notre Dame, in his opinion. And now whether or not that is true,
hates Notre Dame.
But still, that's I think the sentiment from probably at least 50% of the diehards who watch those games, that NBC is putting people in there who actively don't like Notre Dame because of the fact that you don't have anybody from Notre Dame in that booth. So it's like, where are we right now? Like if ESPN on Monday Night Football can have Joe Buck and Troy Aikman in the main booth on Monday Night Football on ESPN, and the Manning cast on ESPN2, it's all viewership, right? And again, if you're doing this on Peacock, you're giving people an actual reason to go over to Peacock and not just having it there. Like what? Right. Like if NBC is over the air, so theoretically anyone in the country with a pair of rabbit ears can go out and find the game. Now, I guess it's a little more detailed than rabbit ears these days because of flat screens and technology, but you would actually give people a reason to go to Peacock and subscribe to the streamer if you did something like this. So I guess, again, my question is, would you cater to the hardcore football fan or the hardcore Notre Dame fan in an alternate broadcast like this?
The hardcore Notre Dame fan. I think you have to, because that's going to be I mean, let's be realistic about this. You're not buying that Peacock subscription unless you're a fan, right? A hardcore Notre Dame fan, like a casual college football fan, isn't signing up for Peacocks. They want to watch the random Notre Dame game on Saturday, right? So I would be willing to say that 90% of the people that sign up that day are hardcore Notre Dame fans. So I think that's who you have to cater to, not the hardcore football fan, the hardcore Notre Dame fan.
Yeah.
Because again, you're only making Notre Dame fans do this to go watch their team on Peacock. And so I think, again, you have to do something to reward the hardcore Notre Dame fans.
I completely agree. Again, because they comprise the highest percentage of your audience. Like, especially like in a season where you've got home games against Northern Illinois and Miami, Ohio, and on down the line, you absolutely like cater to the Notre Dame fans. Again, that's why I think this would be such a good idea. You can have your traditional main broadcast over here on the main network for the masses, and that's obviously going to play, the way you want it to play for the bigger games, for like Ohio State last year and Florida State and whoever it happens to be, the games that end up in primetime. That's you want that down the middle type broadcast crew because you're going to get a bigger audience there. But you still would have a good chance of, okay, the diehard Notre Dame fan, go straight over to Peacock, and you can get your fill of not completely just over the top homers necessarily, but you can get a broadcast that is more specific to being a Notre Dame fan, a different kind of experience that I think that you could have over there. You're really big on the Manning cast for Monday Night Football. And that, of course, again, that's like the premier alternate broadcast. And to be honest, there have been a few alternate broadcasts here and there, like McAfee started doing some alternate broadcasts last year, not really on the style that they were going for on what McAfee did. I'm not saying that I'm completely out on McAfee, but that thing specifically, I wasn't a big fan of the way they did it. What do you love about the Manning cast on Monday Night Football?
So what I love about the Manning cast, first and foremost, is the regular broadcast is like a macro level, and the Manning cast is more of a micro level. If you truly appreciate the game and, outside of kind of the topical on the surface level stuff, then the Manning cast is for you, because the way that they are able to, it's kind of like not necessarily listening to Tony Romo during some of his games, but like the ability where Peyton and Eli literally pre-snap are just like, okay, this is what I see, this is what I would do. And then as the play goes on, they kind of, they're still breaking it down. I just feel like it's like me and my best friend sitting at home, chopping it up, talking about football, and having a good time, right? Like that's what it feels like. They're just hanging out, having a good time, and then you introduce these guests who are also, fans of football,
right?
And then you get them to relate, why is football impactful for you? What is, you know what I mean? Why do you enjoy football so much? What is your reasoning for being a big fan of this team, and whatever else. So like the combination of getting celebrities in there, the ability to break down the game at a high level, but still make it simple for the viewer. That's ultimately what I like so much. And it's to me, there's no biasy in it as well. It's just pure football. They're just talking about what they're seeing and how they would go about it if they were quarterbacks.
And you might remember it was before they went to Peacock when NBC still had the NBC cable channel. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. They tried like an alternate broadcast. I don't know if it was considered the alternate. Yeah, it was. It was an alternate broadcast. They had like, I remember who all was in there? Darius Walker was one of the former players that was in there. I think they had like Jessica Smetana, who used to work for Sports Illustrated, and I think she works for Le Batard now in his podcast network. She's a Notre Dame alum, and they had some others in there. It's not the path that I would go, because I didn't feel like you had the right level of people hosting that show. You know, again, like you said, Brady Quinn. I think it would still be pretty hard to get a Brady Quinn, but I think that there are some others who could drop in the booth. And I just feel like, like the Mannings are doing that, the Manning cast. One, it's not a full entire NFL season. Two, they get to do it from home. Like they get to sit at home and do it from their living room rather than going to a studio, which I think is pretty attractive. And I think that because of that, because you have so many Notre Dame alums who are spread out around the country, I think if you found the right people, it would be very easy to emulate that kind of thing. And like when you look at who you could get, again, like Brady Quinn is the big one. To me, it seems so simple because of like the format that you're talking about, where you've got a couple of guys talking. It doesn't have to be necessarily male, but like everyone's going to have their favorites. I've just said all along, go get the Golics. Like they've got talk show host experience. They are used to talking with people. They're very conversational with people. I mean, Mike Sr. obviously did it for more than 2 decades doing a morning radio show for ESPN, and Golic Jr., kind of came in at the tail end of that, and they've got their own show right now. So they obviously have great rapport. They would have great rapport with all of the Notre Dame alums who you would want to bring into this kind of thing as well. I just think that it makes too much sense. Like I feel like it would be very easy, especially with those two, because you've got Peyton Manning, Eli Manning. You would have Mike Golic, Mike Golic, Jr., Senior. I feel like they could easily, emulate something like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I do think that they could emulate something like that. I just don't know who I would pick to do that, right? But to me, I feel like it's you would want someone that's at least an ex-player or played at the NFL level, right? Because that's the kind of in-depth knowledge that I'm looking for if I'm going to watch, an alternate cast, essentially, is something that differentiates or something that's going to draw me there, because I can easily just watch, the main broadcast that everyone else is doing, right? But I think you have to, if you're going to do it, I think obviously the most important part is who's going to do it, not necessarily the format, but people who are, one, interesting enough, two, know enough about the game, and three, have the ability to be comical at the end of the day. And that's
why I think the Golics make the most sense. That's a big part of why I think the Golics make the most sense. And again, I realize it would never be unanimous. Like no one's going to unanimous. There's not going to be unanimous approval rating. I'm sure that there are people who hate the Mannings and won't watch the Manning cast because they don't, like most of them are probably Patriots fans or Cowboys fans or whoever they happen to be. And like Clontarf says, no thanks, get BQ. Brady Quinn, of course, is who he's talking about. And I mean, again, Brady Quinn is who everyone wants. Because of just the nature of his job. I mean, he gets to do a studio show. He gets to call games. He's got a radio show, all with Fox. And I think that is still, it is still probably pie in the sky for something like that. It would be perfect if they could swing it, but I just don't know that is going to, ever be anything more than a pipe dream, basically. So Andrew says, probably need one Notre Dame guy and one Big Ten guy. NBC has the Big Ten in a spot. Notre Dame is the warm-up act, unfortunately. But again, that's on NBC. We're talking about you're still going to have your main broadcast on NBC, but on Peacock, the streamer, where you can have multiple games going on at the same time, and the Big Ten does have, I believe, multiple games going on at the same time on Peacock. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can have whoever you want in there, because it's not necessarily the warm-up act on Peacock. It would be the act, basically. You're not necessarily leading into something else on Peacock because the way you have to switch around. And, America's Truth Broker says he thought Notre Dame should have went in another direction with the TV deal because NBC doesn't care enough to put together a strong presentation for Notre Dame games anymore. And this is, again, this is how a lot of Notre Dame, this is a pretty large sentiment for Notre Dame fans, the way they feel about the NBC broadcast. That's why I'm saying you've got NBC and Peacock. Why just simulcast the exact same broadcast on on
Right.
both channels. Use the streamer where there's a smaller audience anyway, and you're trying to grow it, and you're trying to get people to pay subscriptions. Do you think that hardcore Notre Dame fans wouldn't pay the Peacock subscription to watch a very Notre Dame focused alternate broadcast over there? I have to think they would.
I would.
Yeah.
Especially if it's
You're the audience.
And these people, in the chat are talking about, this is who I'd go with, or this is and I guarantee if they picked someone Notre Dame, again, someone nostalgic, someone that brings back, the good old days and was a lovable player and an elite player at Notre Dame, and no one's going to say no to that. No one's going to say no to that.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Now, you'd have to pay Brady Quinn quite a bit to get him to do this. One, because it's a streamer, and two, because he's making a lot of pretty good money at Fox. But look, if you don't want to pay somebody else to do it, the most inexpensive solution to this, what have a lot of people said over the last couple of years? Put the radio guys, put Paul Burmeister and Ryan Harris on NBC. Just do what Apple TV is doing with these Friday night Major League Baseball games and give people the option on your remote control on the Peacock stream to switch over to the Notre Dame radio broadcast. For the Peacock broadcast, you've got Notre Dame, then you've got a Notre Dame broadcast right there, and it wouldn't cost you anything other, maybe a couple $1,000 to figure out the technology to be able to put that switch in place. Allow people to use the radio call instead of the TV call on the Peacock stream. And I think that to me, like, that's still a great solution. What do you think?
Yeah, I do. I do think that's a good solution as well.
So they're going to do, of course, this behind the scenes Hard Knocks style, show this season. If you had to pick one or the other, would you pick the Hard Knocks show or would you take the alternate broadcast?
Do you know how long or how many episodes they plan to release?
It's going to be a weekly show, but I haven't seen if that necessarily means it's going to be every week or if they'll take any weeks off or anything like that. So let's just assume 12 shows.
Oh, I would take the Hard Knocks style show because I think you would be able to learn more and again get more out of that essentially. So that as a hardcore fan, I think you would get more out of seeing stuff behind the scenes on the Hard Knocks than you would out of an alternate broadcast. So that's why I'd have to pick the Hard Knocks show.
Yeah, for me, if I was sitting home watching the games, I think I might take the alternate broadcast. But for me, doing shows every day during the week and looking for extra content, I'm going to get more content out of the Hard Knocks show. So I'm going to go with the Hard Knocks show for sure. So that's the direction that I would go as well. Interesting. I'll be curious to see if they ever do anything with it. Nothing is obviously going to happen this year. But with all the technology and the fact that you've got a blueprint out there with the Manning cast for an alternate broadcast, because it all counts as viewers the same, whether it's on NBC or Peacock. I mean, that's why they're doing it, right? And I saw Sloppy Joe saying earlier he doesn't have the antenna. He watches everything on Peacock. It just seems too simple to me. There's been a lot of Notre Dame fans over the years unhappy with the presentation that they get on the broadcast NBC network, and it seems like it would be a very unique way to present Notre Dame football if you did an alternate broadcast on Peacock. Fill in the blank, Jesse. It's blank that the Los Angeles Lakers have their sights set on UConn's Dan Hurley to be their next head coach.
It's very, very, very intriguing that 2 days ago it was JJ Redick, and now
last night it was JJ Redick. I went to bed, it was JJ Redick. I woke up, it's Dan Hurley.
and what makes it intriguing is exactly kind of what I think if you go with JJ Redick, you're playing with one roster, and if you go with Dan Hurley, you're playing with a different roster. And I think that roster does not include LeBron James. And I think also what this is.
Really? You think the Dan Hurley roster does not include LeBron James?
Which is why I think this is intriguing. Because I think this will have a ripple effect not only on the roster, but the organization as well. just because of how this thing is run. You got Jeannie Buss at the top. She's just kind of the face of the operation, right? Like Rob Pelinka really is the guy who runs the whole thing. So, the Lakers since 2010 have had, I think, 7 different coaches. So we're talking about basically a new head coach every 2 years. And I think Dan Hurley is a specific type of coach where if you bring him in, he's not here for 2 years. He's at least here for 4 or 5 years, right? And so that when you start talking about the hierarchy of, you're giving Dan Hurley control. It's no longer, the organization is making a lot of decisions.
Well,
you're giving the reins largely to Hurley, and he's going to be here at least for 3 or 4 seasons. So that's why it's intriguing to me, because I think that dynamic shift based on what type of coach you go with. And there's a big difference between JJ Redick and Dan Hurley.
Well, I mean, huge. One is experience. JJ Redick played in the NBA, obviously, but he has not coached in the NBA. The biggest draw to him is he is LeBron James's podcast co-host. And I mean, you're like, most of your focus is on the LA Lakers side of this, which I find interesting, because what makes, like, Dan Hurley obviously has a ton of success. He's just won 2 national championships. And like, for him, going from Storrs, Connecticut to Los Angeles, I mean, you talk about culture shock just right there, and the difference. But coaching college athletes compared to pro athletes, Andrew says that it's Rick Pitino all over again, because dudes making $50 million a year don't want to be treated like college basketball players. That's why I wonder, because as good a basketball coach as Dan Hurley is, and a lot of the talk on ESPN and the different shows today has been, like, the Lakers want a system. They want to put a system in place, and
Correct.
Dan Hurley gives you a system. But there's still a difference between a college developmental system and an NBA system, especially if LeBron would be involved or any veteran is involved. But like, Dan Hurley is a very intense coach, and that's my biggest question, and I haven't heard it brought up very much today in any of these other shows, is the intensity that Dan Hurley has. Does that play, especially with a veteran NBA roster? What do you think about it from that aspect?
I see what you're saying because of the developmental piece, and by the time you're in the NBA, it's no longer developed. You're playing with what you got, right? Like, that's kind of the whole situation. So that's why I believe ultimately that the roster would kind of go through like a morph, right? Because I think you'd have to have a certain type of player that's going to be willing to kind of play under that style of Hurley, right? And I get it at some point, not everyone's going to be on board, right? And they're professionals, and they're going to kind of have to adapt at the end of the day. But I just, it's hard to think about because of, what you're bringing up of, there's a big difference between a college roster and an NBA roster, and how you coach those type of rosters. And you know what I mean? Like seeing Dan Hurley in some of these games as a college coach, just some of that stuff wouldn't fly in the NBA, right? Like,
yeah,
he's yelling at his guys when they're up 25. Like, you're not doing that in an NBA game.
Well, and especially because you're talking about almost 3 times as many games. And if you get to the playoffs, it is going to be about 3 times as many games as what you're playing in college. And that only goes so far. Like, Pitino was brought up, and there have been plenty of other coaches who've got that college style who've tried to do it in the NBA. And especially today, like, you look at most, like, when they bring those cameras into the huddle on a sideline in the NBA, there's not very much excitement coming out of the coach. It is all very matter of fact. It is, just very, direct, but matter of fact and very chill, basically. You don't see these intense coaches in these huddles barking at guys. It is all just very calm. Okay, you're going to do this. You're going to do this. If this happens, it's like, that's what you see now. It's completely different than the Dan Hurley style.
Michael's saying LeBron and AD have input on the next head coach for the Lakers. I just disagree.
And but that's assuming that LeBron James is staying around.
And that's what I mean. I think that's ultimately, LeBron James is in. He's going to be 40 here soon, right? Like, I don't think the Lakers care about LeBron James in the next 4 years more so than they care about the health of their entire organization over the next 4 years, because LeBron James is just about ready to ride off into the sunset. He just needs to play with his son, right? Like, that's all that's going to happen. And so, like, that's what I'm saying. If Pelinka decides to go with Hurley, I think that's the clear sign that they're moving away from LeBron. So they don't need LeBron's approval. At the end of the day, I think what's going to happen is what they decide is ultimately going to deter what LeBron James does in his last 2 to 3 years of his career.
Yeah. So do you think Hurley has a better chance to win a championship next year with the Lakers, or if he stays at UConn?
UConn.
Really?
100%.
That quick, huh?
Lakers are in, outside of Anthony Davis and Austin Reeves, their roster is in not good shape.
But if he's as good a coach as they think he is, and they bring him in, and LeBron,
yeah, but
around,
you know this. The NBA is a hard league, whether or not people want to say openly admit it compared to college. Like, we watched Luka Doncic pull up from the logo and just keep hitting and hitting. As an NBA coach, what are you doing to stop that? You're not coming up with some crazy new scheme to stop that. It's just one of the best shooters in the world, right? And so that's I don't know. I
think the odds are pretty long at both, but I also think the odds of winning a third straight national championship in college are even longer than if he were to go to LA and be with the Lakers, because maybe, like,
this is the first thing that Brent and I think have agreed on ever on this show.
LeBron and Davis are too old, injury prone, and lack depth. I do agree with that. Don't disagree with that at all. But, like John B is saying, doesn't translate. You aren't motivating NBA players who don't already have that internally.
Right. You either want to be great or not at that level.
Yeah. So speaking of championships, it's blank that Colorado has the fourth most bets placed on them at BetMGM to win the college football playoff this year.
It's wishful thinking. Colorado won't come close to the national championship, and I wish those people would just donate their money to me because I could use it more wisely.
I think this has something to do with it. Colorado had started off with plus 20,000 odds to win it. So obviously, you make even, what, you bet $1, that's 20,000 if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you stand to win a lot if Colorado does win. There's nothing to lose for a relatively small wager. It's gone to plus 12,500, which is still pretty good. But it's very wishful thinking. But I think that's why the money has gone to Colorado, because I think that they're going to struggle to even be a 500 team this year. But because of the fact that they had such good odds to win a national, or the odds are in your favor. I think that's what's drawn most of the money on this thing. You've got all these closet Dion fans floating around out there. So the NBA finals do start tonight. How would you wager, Jess, if you're going to drop a wager or two on the NBA finals? Do you bet the entire series? Do you go, like one team for like game to game? How you've got to have something going. What's your strategy for betting on the finals?
Surprisingly, I don't have anything going quite
Really?
yet. My expenses have been tight the last few months. I've been on a little bit of a cold streak betting wise, so just got to zip it up a little bit, let the money kind of average out, and then we'll start some bets up again. But I think that the way I would do it is I would do just series winner, and I would take the Mavs to win the whole thing. And I think if you want to get fun, you could do Mavs. You could predict the series and do Mavs in 6 or Mavs in 7. And I think that would ultimately, because I think the Mavs win, and I don't think they're doing it in 5. And so again, if you did them in 6 or 7, like if you did 2 bets, because you get even higher odds on that, because you're only predicting the winner, you're predicting how many games it would take as well. That's the kind of route that I would look.
Interesting.
To get some extra juice, right? Because again, this thing is going more than 5 games. And so you could even take the Celtics in 6 or 7 if you want, but instead of just taking straight up, I think you get more juice by picking, either game 6 or game 7.
Yeah. So do you actually like the Mavs to win the series?
Yes.
Really?
I think they're the hottest team with the hottest player.
Yeah. I mean, they both had to sit for a little while. The Celtics have obviously had to sit for a few days longer. Like, is that factoring into your
No,
decision at all?
I just think when it comes down to it, Kyrie Irving is more clutch than Jaylen Brown. He's actually won a championship and been, like he hit the shot to seal the championship for that LeBron and Kyrie and Kevin Love Cavs team against the Warriors. And I just think straight up, Luka Doncic is a better player than Jason Tatum. And so when you combine those two together and how hot the Mavs are, I think they have a better chance. And I think, I don't know if you've seen any of the questions throughout the week, but, Luka's had some lingering injury issues, and they were like, oh, does the time off help you? He goes, no, it still hurts. I just play at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then another funny video I saw, I don't know if you saw this one, but after they, won the Western Conference Finals, there was a video of Luka standing next to his dad, and he's drinking a beer, kind of celebrating in his uniform. And I don't know who it was, but they were part of, maybe the GM, but he walks up and he literally takes the beer out of Luka's hand. He's like, no, not yet. So there must be some sort of agreement, because that's the kind of the running joke between, like Luka and Jokic and these European players is, yes, they're really good, but at the end of the day, they're still kind of, you know what I mean? Like it's not everything to them. They just, they're there to not have a good time, but like, they're still there to, have a few beers if they want them.
All right. Good stuff. We'll see how it goes. Game one tonight. All right. That's going to do it. Jesse's got to get rolling, so we're going to roll on out of here as well. Vince and I will be back tomorrow, because I don't think you're here tomorrow, right?
No, I'm not here tomorrow.
Okay.
Next Friday I am.
That's right. All right. Hit the like button. Subscribe on your Apple Podcasts. Give us a rating as well if you don't mind. And good stuff. Jesse, thanks, everybody, for being here tonight, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.